We're talking Vikings on Daily Delivery today with Ben Goessling from the Star Tribune. Ben, how you doing?
Good, Mike. How are you? I'm just closing up a couple more tabs to boost
We were just having a tab.
the available RAM on my computer for video purposes. So if I look like my eyes are darting, it's for that reason.
We were having a tab off before I started recording. It was like, who has more open
I am
tabs?
bad about it. I mean, I'm typically
Terrible.
like I'm not like the person where it's only one letter of the tab, but
No.
I'm probably two or three sometimes. I'm not great about keeping tabs closed. So
No, and I instead of just like using the same like window I had or the same tab I had open, I just hit the plus button all the time. I'm like,
yeah,
new one, new one, new one. It's like, well, I could probably close it or just reuse the one I
yeah,
have open. It's like I don't need Luke Keishel's baseball reference page
yeah,
open anymore. It's kind of nice to have it open,
yeah.
but it's just in case. But I
I
think
don't need my email open twice.
no.
It's like, okay, no, we're probably good. So
Open
anyway,
tabs are like the keys that you can't throw away around your house.
yeah,
Like we might need these in four. You never know if
yes,
you're gonna need
yep,
these. You
yep,
never know if you're
very
gonna need them. What happens if we end up needing this?
very similar to the junk drawer.
It's the junk drawer of my computer. But anyway, we're not here to talk about tabs. We did for a little while, but Vikings played their second preseason game on Saturday. None of the starters played. A lot of the
Yeah,
top reserves didn't play, but so it was definitely more a game about the rest of the 53-man roster, and we'll get into some specifics in a minute. But any general takeaways from the guys that did play and how that game went?
yeah. I mean, the quarterbacks are going to be the big focus, and we can follow Coach Glenn Crevier's advice and
Quarterbacks.
right about the quarterbacks,
Yep.
as he would say in his thick New England accent, pretty much all the time. So
Yes.
in this case, obviously JJ McCarthy did not play, but there was quite a bit of intrigue with the quarterbacks because Sam Howell starts the game, was not effective whatsoever. And some of that he had some pressure in his face, but he also didn't handle one of the plays where he's trying to throw it away, it gets intercepted. And then Brett Rippon was a little more productive than he was in the previous outing, which was also affected by pressure. But Max Brosmer gets the last two quarters of the game, and you see some of the things they like there. And Kevin O'Connell said afterwards he still would consider the QB2 competition to be open. So that is interesting as we head into the final preseason game, because are they going to decide it on the final preseason game? I think it's a piece of the evaluation. I don't think they're going to do anything based on one game against a bunch of backups, probably from an AFC South team that you beat last year. So I think it will be a more global evaluation, a larger look at the whole body of work for all three of these quarterbacks as we head into the final roster cuts next Tuesday. Yeah, interesting that is still being classified or described by the head coach as an open competition heading into the final week of the preseason. And that's kind of what we've expected. It doesn't lead you to think that it's impossible they go out and get somebody else, but the fact that that's still where we're at is, I think, pretty interesting, especially when you have a 22-year-old starter that they probably would like to have a little bit of assurances behind him. So, yeah, that part of it is pretty interesting. And then we've got, the ongoing question about the kick return spot and the punt return spot. And I think that ties into the wide receiver conversation I'm sure we're going to have too. But a few spots here that are either depth questions or kind of open battles as we head into the final week of the preseason.
I think it was either you or Andrew, somebody else wrote about it. It was just like a sentence, I think, in a story, but it was like, what do they value most in a number two quarterback? Is it someone who can bridge a few games if a starter is injured? Is it someone who just knows the system in and out and can run the offense and help, mentor JJ
Yeah.
McCarthy? Like, what are they looking for really in a number two, ideally?
Well, Kevin O'Connell got asked about this last week,
Okay.
and it was kind of, what do you look for in a number two? And the thing he said is a guy that can come in that has had minimal time during probably a regular season week and knows the offense well enough that he can basically come in cold and run it, whether that's for a few plays or for a game or whatever it is, that a guy that you don't have to have a ton of reps for, a ton of resources allocated to that can be kind of I think of it almost like a reliever saying, hey, we got two lefties we need to get out here, and there's runners on first and second, and we need you now. So can you go in and get this done? I think there's a little bit of that. I mean, you hope you're not dealing with a need for a backup quarterback for weeks at a time, but that nature of you're thrown in and you don't have a ton of prep time from anybody to help you get ready to do the job, and you're expected to go deliver. So that, I think, that's the thing he went to. I think it's interesting because he certainly needed backup quarterbacks in a lot of spots in 2023 and needed to have them start for a lot of the season in 2023 after Kirk Cousins goes down. But looking at it through that lens of, you may need somebody to come in, and Nick Mullins got called on a couple of times last year and made a couple of plays that
he did. I remember that.
them keep things together in close games. So those types of moments are a credit to a backup quarterback in Kevin O'Connell's mind.
Is it realistic then that I guess I'll ask a bigger picture question in a minute, like what's the most likely scenario, but like is Max Brosmer, like, is there a chance he could be the number 2? Like that feels very risky to me with JJ McCarthy as your number 1, but like is that like is that even like a 10% scenario? I'm trying to like game this out.
I would think it's probably about there. The reason I say it's that small is because I think they do want somebody with a little more experience than Max Brosmer has in the NFL as the backup when you have a starter who is still not thrown a pass in a regular season game and is coming off a knee injury that seems like, I mean, by all accounts, from what we've seen, from what JJ McCarthy has said, what everybody has said around him, that is not a factor anymore. But you still need to see that he's going to be able to get through the season, and there's some unknowns there. So I think they'd want somebody that has more experience than Max Brosmer has in that spot. The question, I think, becomes with as good as he's looked, and he was not perfect by any means on Saturday. I think the 2-minute drill actually probably dressed up the numbers quite a bit. I think he was like 10 of 17 heading into all of that. And, the yardage number was, I think, under 100 yards. And so he was not exactly lighting it up until he gets into that situation. But he makes a couple of throws in there, including, I think, the one to Jayshon Jones in a coverage on the backside dagger, that the decisiveness and the placement, it's like, that's a big time NFL throw. And Kevin O'Connell, basically said as much after the game. So if he's doing that, and he'll get a chance to play again on Friday night in Nashville, you may get somebody that says, you know what, if this guy makes it to waivers, let's pick him up. So that would be the thing that I wonder if they're going to be thinking about, because if you try to get him to the practice squad, you have, of course, exposed him to waivers. And I could see them saying, we don't really want to do that. Now, that doesn't mean he's the number 2 quarterback. What it may mean is that they keep 3, at least for the time being, because they do have, sort of an extra roster spot for the first 3 weeks with Jordan Addison suspended. So, I mean, there's a lot of places that you could use that. And it may be that they don't do it with a number 3 quarterback. But I wonder if that will go into their thinking in the next week here as they're trying to figure this out, because I do think, some of the things you've seen him do, coupled with the way he's looked in practice, there may be somebody that says, hey, this is worth our investment, worth a roster spot, at least for now, to get him in our building instead of watching the Vikings develop him. So that's going to be worth watching.
Well, and obviously, like, he wasn't just a camp arm. Like, they gave him $250,000 in undrafted free agency, so they liked him enough to like get a longer look at him.
That dates back to the first pro day he did too.
Yeah, right.
I remember watching that pro day, standing pretty close to Kevin O'Connell, watching him watch Max Brosmer. So this is not a throwing a flyer out there kind of thing. They've spent a lot of time looking at him, and Kevin O'Connell and PJ Fleck are close too, so they've probably talked about him quite a bit.
Okay, so unlikely that he's the 2, just because of look at all the scenarios. Look at he's raw. He's an undrafted free agent. He only played 1 year of major college football. So who is your most likely number 2 quarterback then? Is it Sam Howell, who was basically brought in to do that job? Is it Brett Rippon, who's got more time in the system and is not flashy, but probably has some of those kind of mental reps? Or is it someone who's on another roster right now that's going to get cut in the next week or 2?
Yeah, I mean, there's an argument to be made for any of those three.
I know that's an interesting, and Brosmer is not out of the question either. So
No,
there's
he's
4
not.
possibilities here at this point.
No, there are a lot of possibilities. I would, sitting on the fence is not interesting in these things, so I'm not going to do it.
No. Okay.
I would still probably say Sam Howell, just because he does have experience as an NFL starter that nobody else does. I think that does matter to them. He has shown he can, go through a week of game prep. He can be the starter if you have to do it. I mean, he was in a bad situation in Washington where he was getting a lot of pressure on him.
Right.
And I think some of those things have impacted the way he goes about his job in places since then. But I think if there's somebody that they like out there and they feel like you could bring somebody in that is going to know the offense fairly well, you'd have to have somebody that's up to speed pretty quickly. You could look at a trade. Otherwise, I think it would be Howell with the hope of slipping Max Brosmer through to the practice squad, or you keep him as that third quarterback for now. Rippon certainly is going to be in the mix as well. They've liked the fact that he's run the offense as well as he has, but I think he's getting pushed enough that if you're going to see one of those guys as, okay, we can roll the dice and not have him in the building, maybe it's him. I think it's probably how I would handicap it at the moment.
It's kind of wild to be in this spot because of there was so much quarterback intrigue this offseason. It's like, Aaron Rodgers, Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones. There was, there's a lot of very capable guys who either would have been competing for a starting spot or presumably given the starting spot if it was Aaron Rodgers. But now we're at a point where it's it's definitely McCarthy's job, but behind him, obviously the season goes off the rails if he's hurt in some way, but you're making a pretty big bet right now that he's ready to play at this point based on who your backups are.
Yeah, you are. And I think the way he looked, especially on Thursday in that second day of the joint practices, should give them some reassurances there, because that was an important day for him, both because it was an answer to Wednesday when he wasn't as good, and Drake May looked awfully impressive against the Vikings defense in spurts of that practice. They, I think, did a fair amount of work that resembles, or at least as close as they were going to get to what resembles regular season work, where they
That's
did
what O'Connell
some game
said,
planning.
right?
Yeah,
yeah, he said that afterwards.
Yeah, it was more of something that would resemble a regular season week, where they say, okay, this is based on what we've seen. This is how they're going to attack us. I suppose almost a little bit like playing a division opponent for the second time, where we saw them, we know what they do. Let's work off of that. And you kind of go from there. I think going through that process is important for him. I think it was important for Kevin O'Connell to see it. And then the day that he had coming off of that is a confidence boost for him. That's how Kevin O'Connell talked about it, relative to a quarterback who tends to be a bit of a perfectionist, a bit of an overthinker, perhaps not unlike quarterbacks Kevin O'Connell has coached here in the past. I think all of those things were important for him to see. And the fact that JJ McCarthy played as well as he did last Thursday, they're going to look at that and say, this is a good indicator of why we can be confident. This is a good indicator of the value of the joint practices. I think they'll probably look at it that way as well. But, if you're talking about, can they trust him going into a season and putting a lot of faith in him like we're talking about, I think those types of days are the ones they're going to look at and say, yes, we can make this work with this guy in this season, because of the way we see him handle situations like that, where it's, let's process things, let's go off of what we saw the day before, let's learn from it, and let's build a game plan. And the fact that he did that as well as he did, I think is going to help their confidence and his confidence in himself going into the season.
Not quite as important, but pretty important relative to the quarterback question is who the quarterbacks are going to be throwing the ball to. And the depth chart is thin, Ben. You got, especially when Addison is going to miss the first 3 games. Rondale Moore, who they brought in hoping, some veteran juice, a guy who can maybe help in the short passing game. The punt return game obviously gets hurt out for the season. I don't love the depth chart at wide receiver right now. I'm guessing that's probably another place where they're looking at cut downs from other teams too. But how, you got a young quarterback. You've done a great job of like beefing up the offensive line, giving them a better running game. You've got some good tight ends with Hawkinson and Oliver, but like the pass catchers, at least for the first 3 weeks, that makes me a little bit nervous.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And, obviously the guy they're going to have that they haven't had through most of the preseason, if
Yeah,
he
it's a big
continues
one.
to
Yeah.
progress, that will help some
Yes.
things, I would think. But you need more people than that because, as we know, people are going to cover Justin Jefferson with an inordinate amount of attention, meaning you have to have people that can either make defenses pay for that or, possibly be enough of a factor that they move some of the coverage away from Jefferson. I don't know that you're going to have somebody that is a big enough factor in those 3 weeks that a defensive coordinator is going to say, hey, we got to worry about this other person too, in the way that you would maybe say that about Jordan Addison. But yes, they do need other options that can produce. And that group right now has a lot of questions. I mean, you saw drops from a number of them on Saturday. You saw a drop from Lucky Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
Miles Price could end up in that mix, but is he going to be somebody you trust on a daily or on a regular down basis?
Right.
Jalen Naylor probably is the one that gets the most work there, but he's
Sure.
missed some time because of a hand injury. So how does that go going into this week, going into the season? I think is worth continuing to watch that. And then, you have your Dante Fleming, Thayer Thomas types that have done some things. Jay Sean Jones had some moments on Saturday. Tim Jones had some moments on Saturday, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that any of those guys are, regular season reliable, play them 40 snaps a game types at this point. Ty Felton, the 3rd-round pick, is the other name to think about.
Yeah.
I don't think they view him as like a throw him in as a wide receiver 3 type option right away. I would be a little surprised by that. So yes, it is a big question, and the special team stuff plays into this too because you have a lot of those names that I mentioned in the mix as the punt returners or the kick returners. Felton has been there. We've seen, obviously, Miles Price had the big return on Saturday. Lucky Jackson's been there. We've seen Silas Bolden there a little bit. He has probably been, a little more on the fringes of the picture, perhaps, than we thought he would be. But there are a lot of those names that could make themselves a little more valuable and could carve out a roster spot for themselves because of what they're doing on special teams. So that is the other thing as we go into, I think, 3 days of practice this week. And then the game on Friday, keep an eye on that. And we certainly will keep an eye on it from practices, which are now closed to fans. But what they do at those return spots Friday night, I think, is still very much worth watching because it could have a big hand in deciding some of these roster spots at the end of the wide receiver room, at least for those first few weeks.
Is Felton the one that had the fumble on Saturday? One of them fumbled the
Yes.
kickoff return or punt return. I can't
Yep.
remember which one, but like
It was a kick return, I believe.
it was a kick return after the
Yep.
first Patriots touchdown,
Yep.
and
Yep.
they recovered it. The Vikings recovered it, but it was like 3 Patriots right around there, and it was like he was carrying the ball a little bit loose. And I think the head coach, living through the ball security nightmare of 2023, probably remembered that one a little bit.
Yeah. Those things are not great ways to endear yourself to a head coach that does not like having special teams as a source of stress in his life.
No.
That has not been. I mean, you could have a lot of Vikings coaches that probably could have a support group about special teams as a stressor in their lives.
Yeah.
Kevin O'Connell's predecessor probably would attend a meeting
Yeah.
or two.
Yeah.
I think Denny Green probably could tell a story or two.
Yeah.
You'd have a lot of those coaches that would be part of that. But in this case, it's more about the returners than is the kicker. I mean, Will Reichard was great on Saturday and has looked great for a lot of camp, and I think they feel awfully good about him. But yes, having returners that aren't hanging on to the ball is going to be something that, plays you out of a job pretty quickly. And the other thing with Ty Felton we should mention is they want those returners sometimes to be available as gunners too. In the first game, Felton has the big moment where Oscar Chapman has the punt that's kind of tailing away from the Texans returner, and Ty Felton's there basically as that ball is kind of moving away and it's tough to field. Ty Felton forces the fumble in that spot. So those type, just as those things can help, certainly fumbling, even if you recover it, is not going to be
Right.
something they want to see. So you put all of that in the ledger and then try to figure out, and he'll be on the roster, certainly.
Yes,
They
he's
are
third-round
excited
pick.
about
Yeah.
him, and third-round pick you're not going to cut. But
No.
what does his role look like, I think, is going to be a big question.
I mentioned this today, and maybe we'll finish up here. I mentioned this today because it feels like this is true any year, obviously, that health plays a big role. But it feels like their depth is perilous enough in enough key spots that this is a real every 3 or 4 key guys got to stay healthy kind of
Yeah.
year, or it could go off the rails. I mean, again, you can probably say that about every roster, but it feels particularly true about this year's Vikings.
Yeah, it does. I think there are, you look at the front seven, and that's the depth there is probably about as good as it's been in a long time with the edge rushers, and then even Jalen Redmond, Taki Taimani, Levi Drake
Yeah.
Rodriguez, some of those names behind Allen, Harrison Phillips, and Javon
Yeah.
Hargrave.
Yeah.
They feel pretty good about that, and then
I
certainly that
agree.
linebacker group. But the corners, that's a big question, whether
Yeah.
Isaiah Rodgers staying healthy, Byron Murphy certainly staying healthy.
Mhm.
I mean, if you don't have those types of players, I think things change quite a bit. They feel good about Jeff Okudah. They've gotten a lot of work for him, but is Mekhi Blackman going to be part of that mix? I think those things are questions. And then on the offensive line, they are counting on Will Fries being fully recovered from that tibia fracture. Ryan Kelly has been a little bit banged up during training camp. Christian Darrisaw is coming back from the ACL. And then between Darrisaw and Kelly, you have a rookie left guard. So
Yes.
keeping that offensive line healthy, which is always a question because those guys just absorb a lot of wear and
Mhm.
tear throughout the course of the
Mhm.
season. Having a offensive line that's completely healthy from game 1 to game 17 is not something you see happen very often. You're
No.
going to need Blake Brandel, Michael Juergens, Justin School, those types, probably at least in a game or two here and there throughout the course of the season. So it's there. And then I think Justin Jefferson is as important as ever because the wide receiver depth is questionable his first 3 games. And then, yes, JJ McCarthy,
Yeah.
if they were to lose him, that changes a lot of things. So, I mean, it's not breaking news to say, hey, you need your left tackle,
Yeah.
your
Right. I know.
all-world wide receiver, your
Right.
quarterback to stay healthy. But
Right.
with all 3 of those guys, those questions with injuries have popped up, whether it's Darrisaw coming back,
Mhm.
McCarthy coming back, and Jefferson having what now seem to be fairly consistent, both in the way that they've treated the hamstrings
Mhm.
and the fact that it's been both of them at this point.
Yes.
They are going to pay a lot of attention to his hamstrings, which means you are dealing with an injury that has vexed athletic trainers and medical professionals across every sport
Yes.
in North America, certainly, and probably around the world too, when you get
Yeah.
into soccer and track and field. I mean,
Yes.
hamstrings are a mystery that no one has figured out, and they're not one that you typically want to have determining the fates of a season. So, yes, there are a lot of those guys that need to stay healthy, or this thing is perilously close to spinning out of control.
I don't, I'm not saying this was underrated because we didn't cover it, but like I feel like as we kind of remember the story of 2024, one of the underrated parts that we shouldn't overlook is how well Cam Robinson played
Yeah.
in place of Darrisaw when he got hurt. Like having someone step into that and just basically like he wasn't as good as Darrisaw, obviously, but like someone who was dependable at that spot, like that was a huge part of last year, and they're not always going to have that luxury at all these positions.
Yeah, you're right. And he certainly struggled at the end of the season. You saw it in the
Of course,
Rams
he did.
game.
Yes.
But to get to a situation where you win 14 games when
All
you
right.
lose your left tackle in the middle of the year, yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. To have somebody come in and make it so that that loss is not the crippling blow that changes the course of your season completely is not something you see every year.
No.
So having depth at those spots, especially at that spot, I
Yes.
think is important. And they will have some of that, I think, between Brandel and School, but it changes with Darrisaw in there. They know that.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
having your left tackle back and completely healthy with a first year starting quarterback is an important component of making him feel good and making this whole thing a little smoother all around.
So now we've got like 3 days of practice this week, the game on Friday, and then it's like 16 days until the opener. Actually 17 probably because they're a Monday night opener. Like, what do they do in those 17 days? Do they shut it down for a little bit? Do they kind of what? Yeah, that's a weird gap. It
Yeah.
feels like that's being created by eliminating this last preseason game.
Yeah, the NFL has kind of turned that into a little bit of a bye week. So roster cuts will come a week from Tuesday. So the 20, whatever that is, I'm in training camp mode, 26th, I think.
Yep.
Is the Tuesday. So that's when we will get all of the roster cuts. They have to happen by 3 p.m. that day, but they will, probably start to trickle in Sunday, Monday after that game. They'll probably do the first ones, and then practice squad gets set from there, and then you'll have people. They'll give players a good chunk of the weekend, a good chunk of Labor Day weekend, just to recover, and you'll get a little bit of players will probably leave and get a little bit of time with families, which is the fact that this has gone. That last preseason game is gone is a rare moment where the NFL actually creates space in the schedule. It's usually it's just taking more of it. But
right.
The fact that has changed, it creates a little bit of a buffer for players, and then they'll probably be back with the full 53, kind of have what they would describe as a bonus day on that Monday, probably Labor Day. Typically they're out there practicing, and then you'll maybe give players another day there. I mean, ordinarily before a Monday night game, your practice week would be Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and you'd give them Tuesday and Wednesday. But I wonder if they will say, let's get a couple of extra days in here. Let's bring people back on Monday, give them Tuesday off, come back for kind of another bonus day Wednesday, and then get into game planning. If there's kind of a couple little extra days of training camp type stuff you want to do, they have a little bit of that time because of the Monday night opener and because of that kind of quasi bye week the league has put in. So you can give players some time, but also then say, let's grab a couple days here to get some things done so we feel good about ourselves before we go full into game planning for the Bears. So that's kind of the map I would expect to see. It'll be pretty quiet at the beginning of next week because they're involved in doing all those cuts. And the fact that there's only one roster cut, only one set of roster cuts now, you're going from 90 to 53. It's not 90 to 75, 75 to 53 anymore. So those are busy days of bringing players in, telling them they're being released, telling them what you liked, telling them what they can work on. I mean, they certainly try to give some time for players in those meetings to provide feedback. I mean, Kevin O'Connell has talked about that with Bill Belichick, that when he was in those meetings, that 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever it is that Belichick took to say, hey, here's what I saw. Here's what you can work on to help you at your next stop. He said that was invaluable for him. So that's something he tries to do with a lot of players they're going to cut. And, that when you're doing that times 37 is a lot of time. So you won't see a lot of, from our standpoint, being in there to cover practice and stuff. There won't be a lot of that next week. The cuts will be the primary thing early next week.
Interesting. It's just like they go full throttle for like a month, and then it's like they got a downshift for almost like 2.5 weeks, and it's an interesting time now for them. And I'm sure O'Connell maximizes it. He's got a plan for it, but it's just it's a weird little slice of how the NFL works now.
It's a recent change. It always used to be cuts for Labor Day weekend. I can remember Andrew Kramer and I sitting in the Star Tribune office, just kind of going through all the roster cuts, sitting in our cubes. That Saturday was quiet. We're like, well, we're going to be talking all day anyway. We might as well just be in the same spot. We always just like run over to Potbelly or something, sandwich, and then get back to manning the phones, manning the computer for all of the cuts. So the fact that it's no longer Labor Day weekend is kind of nice.
Not so bad for you.
It's a gift from the NFL, which is not perhaps the most magnanimous organization in the world, at least in terms of scheduling.
No, it's not. Well, I'm sure we'll talk plenty about that after the cuts come and as the season gets closer. Ben, terrific work as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.